Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Zach Wortzel, and I am the manager of experiential learning for the Bauer College of Business. I'm also a career development specialist working with undergraduate marketing and entrepreneurship students. Today, for Recruiters Get Real session, we have Renée Hebert with HPE. A really great session we have today. It is a Ask Me Anything About Recruiting. So any questions you have for Renée, please put in the chat and I will moderate and get those questions over to her. But I'm going to turn it over to Renée to introduce herself, and please send me anything that you'd want to ask. Renée, take it away.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Zach. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I always love my time with UH students. And as Zach said, I'm Renée Hebert. I work with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, also known as HPE. And I work in the Houston, Texas office, and I oversee our university recruiting and intern program for our Americas region. So that includes North America and Latin America. I've been with HPE about 5.5 years and came from HPE after a career in higher education. So for 15 years, I actually was on the opposite side of this and worked at 3 different universities and then decided to take my talents and skills to the corporate world. So I'm happy to be here today, happy to answer any questions you have. I told Zach I wanted this to just be really open to anything and looking forward to answering your questions.
Cool. Thank you, Renée. So let's get started. The first question I wanted to ask was, how do you, as a recruiter, look at resume piles? What would be a way that a student could get their name or their resume up that pile?
Yeah, this is a question we're asked a lot, and it's tough, right? I mean, especially now. So I would say one of the most important things, and you've probably heard this before though, but form a connection with the recruiter if you can, get to know them, meet them at an event or reach out to them so that your name does come to the top of their brain so that they can make sure they're looking at your resume and pass it on to the hiring manager or whoever is next in line. I think it's really important to also kind of get an in at that company. And being a UH student, you have thousands of UH alumni at your disposal. So reach out to them, network with these alumni, find alumni that are working at those companies that you're really interested in getting to know so that they can help bring your resume to the top of the stack. And that takes time. You have to build that relationship with that alumni so that they feel confident recommending you. So I've seen it before where students will just reach out to an alumni, and it happens to me from my alma mater, and they'll say, hey, I went to this school too, and I, applied to this job. Can you help me? Think of it in a little bit different. Get to know us, build that relationship. Tell them that, it's okay to say I applied to this job, but then say, I would love to learn more about this company. Do you have time that we can chat so that I can learn more and really build that relationship? Because just because we went to the same school doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to recommend you. I'm going to help you, but I may not recommend you right off the bat because that's my name at stake. So, get to know those alumni, get to know people that are associated with that company. That's the best way I find that your name can kind of rise to the top of that stack, if you will.
Cool. Thank you, Renée. I think that's really great advice. So I had a question come in about international students. Is HPE sponsor or work with international students? And if so, what would that hiring process look like? Or maybe also just what some advice do you have for international students in the job search?
Yeah, this is always a tough question. I'm going to be really honest. It is a tough one. So with HPE, there are some positions that we sponsor for and some that we don't. It really just varies. And as those of you that are dealing with sponsorships probably know, as a corporation, our hands are tied on some of that. So, some of it really isn't up to us. It's up to the government and what we are allowed to do and how many people, we can bring in and so forth. And so I'm not going to say that we don't sponsor, because I know that there are times that we do. I think with HPE, it's more prevalent in those positions that are a little more advanced and a little higher than what we would bring in at the level you guys are looking for as new grads. So it really is tough. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I have great advice for this, because it is a tough situation. One thing that I know I say for our company is keep in mind that we are a global company. I know not every company is, but we're a global company. So there may be opportunities for you to get your foot in the door in other countries. And I know that may not right now be ideal or what you were looking for, but it is a way to at least get into the company and then explore opportunities afterwards. And so I think with that situation, you've got to be a little flexible. And I've had a lot of conversations with international students about it. I understand, most of them say, but I want to be in the US. And while I understand that, if that's not possible and you do want to work for our company, there are other options. You just have to be open to it. So the path that you thought you would be on may not be the exact path that gets you where you thought you might be going and where you want to go. So I would say, sometimes you do have to be a little flexible. I actually, when I worked in higher education, I had a student that was from Canada and was working with a great company, a global company, and she fell into a similar situation where they could not keep her in the US, but they hired her in another country. She eventually was able to come back to the US, and now I think she's like in Asia and loving it. But the point is, she was very open to the opportunity because that was the company she wanted to work for, and they were willing to work with her and explore opportunities in other countries, which in her case led her back to the US. I'm not going to say that's going to happen for everyone, but just being open and flexible to, your path might have looked like this, but maybe you got to take some curves in the road to really get to where you want to be.
Cool, thank you. I think that really helps out explaining that a little bit. So I got a question. What are the attributes that HPE wants to see in their candidates? So when you're looking at candidates for specific positions, what are some of the skills that you're mostly looking for?
Yeah. So I would say in terms of skills, that's going to vary. Although we're a technology company, we hire outside of technology, which is what you guys are probably mostly interested in. So I think when it comes to skills, that's a hard question to answer because it depends on if you're doing finance or marketing. But what I will say outside of, and maybe you guys would classify these as skills, but I would say for HPE, one of the most important things for us outside of having those skills is being a fit with our culture. And I think this should be a concern for all of you, no matter what company you're going to. I know it's something I wish I would have realized earlier in my career is finding a company that fits with your beliefs and your values and that you buy into their beliefs and values. And so for us at HPE, those are things like we want people that are innovators. And that doesn't mean you have to invent the next big, technology thing. That just means being creative, thinking outside of the box, being curious, asking questions, pushing to be better, right? I'm in HR. I'm definitely not going to be creating the next big server that helps our company. But what I can do is push and question and see where things need to be improved and do that. So we've got a couple of beliefs that we want to make sure are fit. So, one of them is kind of what I just mentioned, accelerating what's next, looking beyond, going beyond what we're doing now, committing and going. We believe in being really bold. So that's where that curiosity comes in. And we have a phrase that's embrace courage over comfort. And I think that's important because we want you to step out of that comfort zone and really think about what's next, right? As a technology company, we move really quickly, and we have to. We have to keep up with the market, and we have to always be several steps ahead, or else we're not going to be relevant and we're not going to succeed. We also have a saying that says, fail fast, learn and improve. So I like that it's okay to fail here at HPE, but don't dwell on it, right? Fail, figure out what happened, what we can do to improve it, and let's move on and improve it. We also believe in the power of yes, we can. So like I said, pushing for better, pushing to be better. We talk about having healthy impatience. So, really just kind of continuing to push that envelope. We talk a lot about we before I. So we're a company, anything we do is to better all of us. And then last, I would say, we really believe in being a force for good. It's in our DNA. It goes back to the beginning of the inception of our company and just giving back. And we want to use our technology to solve for humanity with humanity. So people that really want to use technology to better the world, you believe in unconditional inclusivity. You believe in just giving back. We are really big on volunteering as a company. We even get paid time off to volunteer. So monthly, I can take time out of my day and get paid for it and go volunteer for whatever charity I choose. And so outside of those skills you'll need for the job, like I said, whether that's accounting or finance or marketing or MIS or whatever that is, it's really important for us to make sure there's a culture fit, because what we have found is if you don't buy in and you aren't a match with that culture, in the long run, it usually doesn't work. And I think that can be said for most companies. And so on that note, I really want to encourage you that as you are looking for companies, I always remind students, it's a two-way street. So you should be interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So ask those questions about culture and their values and what they believe in and what they expect of their employees. Because one, I think it's going to give you a good idea of their expectations of you. But two, you want to be in a place that is going to be a good fit for you culturally, because you'll have a much better experience. The company's going to have a much better experience, and overall, it's just better for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice, and we tell that to students all the time too. Just you're trying to find a place that you'll fit to. So make sure to that place at the end of the interview where you're asking questions. That's an important part to figure out some of those things about where you potentially would be working.
It is. And Zach, one thing I even do personally, because you can go online and I can look at a company's website and I can see, they have on there what their values are. I'm really big on walking the walk and talking the talk. So one of the questions I even ask when I'm interviewing for a job is, I may say, I saw on your website that these are your values, and maybe I pick one of them that's maybe important to me. And I say, tell me how day to day your company demonstrates this value, or what are you doing in your job right now, whether it's a project or whatever that demonstrates this value. So ask for real examples and tangible examples of what they're doing and how they live those values. And if they can't answer that, that would be a red flag for me personally, because like I said, I'm really big on, don't just put on a website that this is what you believe in. Show me how you do it and tell me how you do it and give me some examples.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect transition into a question I just got was, being bold and growing is something that's part of the culture at HPE. One of the students asked, can you talk about the importance of personal professional development at HPE?
Yeah, that is, I think in most companies that's big, but I know that at HPE, I think we kind of make it even larger if that's possible. And so we definitely have a culture here where if you're not growing and developing yourself, then what are you doing, right? Because we all need to grow. There's room to grow no matter how long you've been in your career or your profession. And so we're consistently supported in that through various ways. We have managers that are allowed to have, not allowed, but are, provided budget to support us in our growth opportunities. If there's something that requires maybe a fee to take a course or attend a conference or whatever that looks like. I know this summer, my direct leader, she even sent an email out to our entire organization and said, hey, I don't want you guys to forget this, right? It's been a tough year. We've all been kind of head down, focused on how to make this transition and COVID and so forth. And you guys have worked really hard. Don't forget that there's opportunities out there. And I want to challenge all of you guys in the next month to go and sign up for whatever that is that you need, whether you want to improve your Excel skills, right? Maybe you need some help with that. Maybe there's a course or something you wanted to be certified in, not that she doesn't always offer this opportunity, but I really love that she took the time to send us an email to say, hey, don't forget about this. Don't forget to fill your bucket, right? We've been focusing so much on other people, especially in HR. Don't forget to do these things. And so with us, there's always an opportunity. We've got internal platforms too, that if you wanted to do a search and teach yourself something or watch a video, we have lots of internal platforms as well. And then on the flip side of that, there are things that HPE wants to make sure that we're learning, that they put on sessions for. So a great example of that is, I mentioned one of our core beliefs is inclusivity. And so I just came off of a session we did for our current interns in the Americas. And the session was called Inclusion for All. And our company actually launched this for the entire company globally. I think it was in January or February. And so everybody at the company it's a requirement, hard to make 60,000 people do something, but they did launch this in an effort to say, we are an inclusive company and we want to educate you on that. No matter where you are in this journey of being inclusive to everyone, we want to educate you on this. And we've had things in the past, of course, but this was a newly launched inclusive for all type thing. So there are things internally too that are constantly happening on different topics that we can always jump into and do as well. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
definitely. I think so. No, thank you for that insight. So speaking about the process of, so that was kind of once you're in and some of the professional development there, but the recruiting process itself, can you talk a little bit about, is networking important to advancing in the recruiting process with HPE? What advice do you have for students to potentially network with people within the company while they're trying to apply?
Yeah, I think networking is important no matter what company. I'm going to just be very honest there. I think it's important whether you're job hunting or not job hunting. I think it is what makes the world go round. And I say this as one having experienced it myself. The majority of jobs that I've gotten have been because of my networking and calling on people and so forth. But I also have a niece that just graduated from another university, which I won't name. But I think she really learned the importance of what we've been telling her, which is networking. But it's absolutely important. And so anytime that the Career Center or Bauer in general, or UH in general, is advertising that an employer is going to be on campus or host an event like this, and you're interested in that company, or even if you're not sure, take advantage of those opportunities, because this is an opportunity here for you to interact with me who works at HPE. And what that means is, after this, if you're interested in HPE, you can, you have the advantage of shooting me an email or connecting on LinkedIn and saying, hi, Renee, I joined the Recruiters Get Real session today, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about HPE, or I wanted to follow up on something you said, or whatever that might be. So I think networking is huge. Kind of, as I mentioned, of how do you get your resume to the top of that pile? It really is about networking, and HPE is no different. And especially with a company as large as ours. I mean, we are a 60,000 person company globally. We are huge. And for you guys being at UH, we are in your backyard, right? I'm here in Houston. We have a large representation here in Houston. We have several thousand people in Houston. Our headquarters just moved to Houston. I don't know if you guys know that. We are all in when it comes to Houston. And so there's really no reason, especially you guys, that you can't be connected with someone at HPE. You know, reaching out to Zach, or I think I saw Raji on the call, anyone, I mean, they all know us and know that they can put you in touch with us. And so networking is essential, taking advantage of opportunities like this, where you get the face-to-face time with anyone from HPE. And it doesn't just have to be a recruiter. Keep that in mind, right? It can be anyone at HPE. So I know you guys are doing LinkedIn searches and you're looking for the recruiter online, and that's great, but also look for people who are in a job that you're interested in. So if you're in finance, look for those people that are UH alums that are in our finance area that work for HPE. Start connecting with them. You know, I know I actually had an email today from our finance group, and they want to do an info session, you know, with one of our partner schools, and it was probably UH. When they have those things, take that time, go and meet them. If you're not able to attend because there's just a scheduling conflict or something, find out who is hosting that from HPE and email them and say, I'm not able to attend this session, but I'm really interested in learning more. Do you have some time that we can chat and I can learn more from you, right? So just going that extra mile is going to be really helpful too, and making sure you're forming those connections and networking with the right people.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that's super good advice and really helpful for students that might be interested. I got some speaking about the recruiting process, some more like technical pieces about what does the recruiting process look like. So what does the HPE, just I'd say in general, what does the HPE hiring process look like? And then a student asks, what month does the internship recruiting season start for HPE?
Yeah, two great questions. So first, the easy question, you will start to see jobs for internships for next summer, 22, posted in August. So mid to late August, you will start to see those jobs posted. The first thing you have to do, which some students don't realize, you have to apply to the job. And I often tell students, that's the first step in letting us know you're interested in that job. If you don't apply for that job, we don't often know you're interested. We may find you in other ways, but you know, if you're not attending an info session and talking with us and so forth, and you're not doing anything and you're interested in us and you don't apply for a job, you're not on our radar. So first and foremost, find that job online, apply to that job. Once you have applied to that position, what typically happens is our recruiters do what we call sourcing. So they take a look at those candidates that have applied for that position. And keep in mind with university recruiting is a little bit different than once you get into kind of that, you know, you're applying to more experienced positions, because our job openings are open a little bit longer than, say, a position that you've been in the workforce for 5 years, right? Because we're opening them in August and we're going to lots of different events at lots of different universities. And those last through September, sometimes October. And so keep in mind that, right? So sometimes the process is a little bit slower, but as students are applying, our recruiters are mining that data, as I like to say it in technical terms, and they're doing searches for those students that have applied of who has what they're looking for. They're also looking at, we have another system called Yellow, and if any of you have talked with us at a career fair or attended an info session or something like that, you've probably seen us ask you to give us your information on an iPad, or we've given you a link to give us some information. We're also mining that data to see, who fits the need for whatever job it is that we're looking for. So once our recruiters have kind of mined that data, they have kind of a shorter list of people they think would be good. They are sending that list of candidates with those resumes to those hiring managers. Typically the recruiter first, let me back up. First, typically they'll do what we call a screening call, and they'll call those that are on their short list to make sure that they're a fit for what that manager is looking for. If that screen goes as planned and you're what we're looking for, then they'll pass you on to the hiring manager and ask the hiring manager, to select who they would like to actually have an interview with. From there, things can vary a little bit depending on the hiring manager and our internal business's preferences. So we've got some businesses that like to do panel interviews. So your first interview may be with a couple of different people. Your first interview may be with one person. You may have 2 or 3 or 4 interviews. If you're more on our technical side, you're going to have a technical interview, and so forth. So it does vary past that point a little bit. And so I don't want to sit here and say this is exactly what will happen past that point of the screening with the recruiter, because it can vary a little bit. But you should expect at least 1 or 2 interviews. Like I said, that may be one-on-one. It may be with, a couple people and so forth. But that can vary a little bit. We are doing virtual interviews right now. Just to let everyone know, we still are very much virtual, working from home. Actually, on Monday, we opened up some of our sites to 20% capacity. We tend to take a much more conservative route when it comes to things like the pandemic. And so we are still doing interviewing virtually in the US, and we still will do career fairs virtually. So just want to prepare you guys for that, so that if you are applying and do get to interview, you're prepared that it's still going to be virtual.
Cool, thank you. I think that provides really good ways for students to know what to expect. Speaking of those virtual interviews, how would a student try to impress in a virtual interview or a phone interview? Because it's obviously similar to a regular interview they'd go to in person, but there are definitely some pieces with a virtual interview or phone interview that would be maybe a little bit more challenging to make the impression that they want.
Yeah, and I think the first thing I would say to that, Zach, is don't forget about everything else you learned, right? There are still things that you would do at an in-person interview that you need to do for a virtual interview. So don't forget that. I think that's one thing some not even just students, everybody is forgetting, is there's still things there that you need to make sure you're doing, right? Make sure you're dressing appropriately. That may not in today's world mean you need to have a suit on, but you want to be appropriate. Make sure you've done your research and so forth. I think when it comes to virtual interviewing or anything virtual, it's harder to convey maybe your enthusiasm for something and really show maybe your passion. So I think you do have to work extra hard, even like I'm doing right now, right? When we're on anything virtual, you really have to kind of overemphasize things so that people really are getting you and understanding you and feeling that passion or that excitement and whatever it is you're trying to convey. It's almost like being an actor or an actress or in theater. You really have to not overdo it to the point where it's obnoxious, but you really do have to put a little more effort into it, because you are trying to convey yourself over a camera, and they're not right there to maybe see your hand gestures or see the little twinkle in your eye or how excited you get when you're talking about something. So I think you do have to overemphasize those things. I think your words matter, right? Choose those words carefully, because again, I think although they are seeing you, I think sometimes we're not picking up on clues that we might pick up on if we were in person. I think and like this is the same whether you're in person or not. Ask questions, but even more so now, ask questions. As we would say, be curious. Make sure that you're showing that you're interested in this job. And I think that's what I would say as far as virtual interviewing. Like I said, there's so many things that you still need to do, whether it's virtual or in person. So I'm starting to drift off to those things that normally you would do while you're in person, but main point here is don't forget about what you would do in person, because that's still as important. But then also what I just said, and then, the thing too with virtual is make sure you're in a quiet place. Make sure you're not going to have interruptions. While we understand that things happen, you do want to try and minimize that as much as you can, right? If you have roommates, make sure your roommates know, hey guys, I've got an interview from this time to this time. So if you're going to do your interview there in a place that you share with other people, whether it's roommates or family, come to an agreement on what does that look like? Does that mean that they leave? And does that mean that they're super quiet? Does that mean that you go somewhere else? But have those discussions and so forth. So try to do the best that you can to make that virtual interview as great as it would be in person, and try to minimize some of those things that just kind of sometimes happen on virtual interviews.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, and I said this last week, and it is really going to be the virtual interviewing hill that I'm going to die on. But change your fire alarm batteries. The fire alarm battery is beeping. Please change it. We have had too many student appointments where we've heard that, and it's something where it can be very, very annoying during an interview.
Yeah, and Zach, that's a great example. And even things such as if you, for example, with any of your programs or applications you have on your computer, Outlook or Slack or Teams or whatever, if you have it set to ding every time you get an email or this or that, there are times that the other people can hear that. I've been on calls where I'm thinking, can you just please turn that off? Because it's dinging every few seconds. So little things like that. You're absolutely right, Zach. Like, just be conscious of those types of things that can just be an interruption and can get people off track, whether it's you or the interviewer, because that can be disruptive, and it may not make for a great interviewing experience. And at the end of the day, we want you to have a really good experience. And so the more you can eliminate, the more we can eliminate, the better that interview can be.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's 100% right. So I had a student ask specifically about maybe what does the technical interview look like for HPE, and then maybe just some general advice on how would you say students can prepare for technical interviews?
Yeah. Technical interviews, I'll be honest, I've never done one myself, because I oversee the recruiters and don't actually do those, but usually our hiring managers do. But I do know that most of them will give you some type of scenario. And usually, I'm just going to take this as an example because I know some of you on here probably write code. They may give you an example and ask you to write the code for whatever it is, that scenario, or, may say, here's some code, what issues do you see with this, and so forth. So I know at several conferences that we've been to and we've done interviewing there, I've seen all the, I don't want to call it scribbling, but I've seen all of that on whiteboards and so forth. And so, I think on that end, it's just a matter of, showing your skill and showcasing that and demonstrating it, and not being afraid to do that. I mean, there's a fine line between being really boastful and bragging on yourself, and then showing what you can do and demonstrating your capabilities. And I think that's what you have to do, is demonstrate that, you've got that. And I would say, if at any time during that technical interview, you have a question or you're uncertain, ask. Again, that goes back specifically to HPE's culture of be curious, ask the questions, don't make assumptions that you know everything, right? And so I think, to me, that shows from a candidate too that you're willing to do those things, and we all have to do those things. We may not all like to admit that we do those things or need to do those things, but we do. So that's what I would say on that. There was a second part to the question, Zach, other than the technical.
It was just kind of just overarching advice for a technical interview. So you sort of hit on that a little bit.
Yeah. Like I said, just I think the first thing I would double check on is there's so within HPE specifically, we use a lot of different languages when it comes to coding. And so if you are a technical person and you are going to have a technical interview, I would make sure you know what language they're expecting of you. That would be the first thing. I think for some people, they may say, well, that's obvious. It's not at HPE. We have a lot of different languages. We have managers that have preferences on languages. And so when you're talking to that recruiter for the screening call, that's probably a question they're going to double check with you is, do you have experience with XYZ languages? Because that's the preference for that particular position for that manager. So, I would just double check with the recruiter, with the manager that you've got that right language and that skill and you can do it. Some are flexible, so that's good. But I would say, I mean, from what I know, that really is just coming down to demonstrating your skills. So just make sure you're brushed up on, on that technical skill. Maybe I'm sure you can go online and find some scenarios that you could just practice through, almost like you would a mock interview, right? Find some of those examples online, maybe, or if you know some technical people in the field, like I said, kind of do a mock interview with them, ask them to give you some scenarios or some examples so that you can practice and be ready for those different scenarios, which are always hard because you don't know what they're going to throw at you. It's one of the reasons I'll be honest, I hate behavioral interviewing. I mean, it's great from a recruiter perspective and a hiring manager perspective because it gives us great insight. But when I'm on the opposite side of the table, it's hard because they can ask you any question. You've got to kind of go through your files in your brain and try and pick the best scenario possible. So just be brushed up on those skills for those of you that are doing technical interviews.
Cool, thank you. So I got a bunch of different questions about, like, can you talk about if HPE hires X major? So supply chain, finance, types of internship. So maybe just overarching, can you talk about what majors you'll most actively recruit from Bauer?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Bauer, finance, accounting, supply chain, MIS, I'm sure I'm going to miss some that Zach and Raji can help me with. We do hire MBAs. That's a smaller number, but we do hire MBAs. What have I missed, Zach? What other majors?
She said accounting, finance, MIS, supply chain. The other ones would be HR and marketing.
Yes, and HR and marketing. Yes, all of the above. So I think the misconception often with a company like HPE, because we are technical, is we only hire technical people. I'm a great example. I am not technical at all. I don't act like I'm in that world. I'm not. I'm in HR. I have a degree in psychology and I have a master's in counseling. And so what I think people forget about is we're a company at the end of the day. We are a global company and it takes every major to make this organization run. And so the bulk of our hires if I look at our company from a global perspective, the majority of people that work for us are not technical. Now obviously we have a large technical population, but we have to run just like anybody else. So we need supply chain. I mean, we've got things we've got to get places. We need accountants and finance and marketing. We need it all. So bottom line is we hire every major that is related to Bauer. So please keep in mind that because we're technical doesn't mean we're not hiring you guys. We may at the university level hire you guys in a smaller quantity, but there still are a lot of jobs out there. Finance is really big for us. Our finance program always has a large intern population and program. And I don't want to discount the others, but finance, especially supply chain, has a rotational program, which is really great. That's at our graduate level, so that entry level, so lots of great things, and just know that we definitely are hiring you guys in Bauer.
Cool, thank you. So I think something you said is a good transition to a question that I got about you mentioned your experience switching from higher education to HPE. And someone asked, how did you see your hired experience translate into HPE? But I think that also could just be a transition into, can you talk a little bit about transferable skills and how students might be able to talk about those things?
Yes, I can talk to that. I lived through it. Obviously, I did make a career change after 15 years. And I can tell you, and I've always told everyone, transferable skills are a real thing and they're very important. And you have them. You just have to know how to, I guess the best way to think about it is you have to know how to step outside of your box and really look at what you know, what you've done, and not think about it in just the terms of, I did this at this job or this company or what have you. I think one of the best ways to help you identify transferable skills is to talk to someone else. I used to do this with students. They'd come in with their resume and they'd say, I need help. And I'd say, okay, let's just put the resume aside. Talk to me about what you did at X job. And they'd say, oh, well, I was just a waitress. Okay, you weren't just a waitress. There are a lot of things that are involved in being a waitress. There's customer service, right? You may have had to enter, if you were at a sophisticated restaurant, you may have had to use some software, right, on a regular basis. Maybe you trained people, new people that came on. There's lots of transferable skills there that sometimes I think we're not able to see. But two things I would recommend to, one, identify them, because I think first you have to be able to identify your transferable skills. One is talk to someone else. Tell them what you did, talk to them, because like I said, sometimes we're in our own box, in our own bubble, and we can't get out of that thinking. Two is do what I call a brain dump. I personally keep a written brain dump. Anytime I've had a position, I have this running list, and it's obviously pretty long now, but I have this running list of things that I did in that job, so that with every job I apply to, I can go back, so I don't have to remember it. I can go back and pick out those things that relate to that job and go and remind myself, oh yeah, I did that, right? I worked on this project that would be a perfect demonstration of whatever it is that they're looking for in that job description. So do that, do a brain dump, kind of think about at each of those jobs, what did you do? And don't take anything for granted. Like I said, I would have students, and you guys still, when I come and talk to you guys, people say, well, I just did this. Think about everything that goes into it. Think about every little thing, because those are all, they're going to be transferable skills. Especially let's look at student organizations, right? Many of you, I'm sure, are in student organizations, whether you're a leader or not, and I hope that you're a leader, but regardless, there's got to be something within either those student organizations or even in your academic classes that you can take and translate and relate to what an employer is looking for, right? So if an employer is looking for, I'm going to take an easy example. Let's say we're looking for a marketing intern, and we want someone who, can demonstrate that they have done some social media campaigns. Well, maybe you just so happen to do one for your student organization, or you worked on a project in your class, or what have you. Those are things to keep in mind that all have those transferable skills. Just because you did it in an academic setting or in a student organization setting doesn't mean it's not transferable. So I think you first have to start off with identifying those transferable skills and then selling yourself on those transferable skills. We typically are not really good at selling ourselves. And sometimes you have to tell people why your transferable skills relate to what they're looking for. I found myself doing that when I was making a career change. There were some people I interviewed with that I had to really sell myself. They were calling me and interviewing me, but they maybe weren't totally sold on it yet. I really had to sell myself and say, and look at their job description and be able to check off all of those points and say, yes, I did this when and here's the example, and here's how I handled that, etc. I also, myself personally, was very intentional with my job hunt when I was looking to make that change. And so I looked for positions where I knew my transferable skills fit. Sometimes there are just things you can't make fit. So, make sure you're doing that. Talk to that company, have those open and honest conversations about, because I had to do it. I had to say, look, I've not worked in the corporate world. I've not worked in technology, but here's what I can bring you. And here's what I understand you're looking for. So sell yourself. I think that that's really important when you are looking at those transferable skills. But again, going back to, you can't sell yourself if you don't know what you're selling, right? So really get to know yourself, what your skills are, what those transferable skills are, and practice how you want to sell them and how you can talk about it.
Cool, thank you. I think that's super good advice. So I'm going to throw a question in here that I think is important for students, and hopefully everyone in here knows this already. But can you talk about the difference between HP and HPE? I think it's just good for people to know that difference, so they don't get into an interview and say the wrong thing.
Yes, I am happy to do that. So I'll give you some historical information here too. So about 5.5 years ago, HP, Hewlett Packard, which you guys probably know, you've probably used their laptops or their desktop or a printer or something. They split into two companies, two separate companies. And so the result of that was HP Inc. and then HPE, which is Hewlett Packard Enterprise, which is who I work for. And so they essentially took this over 100,000 people company and separated it into two. So HP, Hewlett Packard, is what you know as a general consumer. They do laptops and printers and so forth, and I'm probably not selling that appropriately, but that's the easiest way I think it is to explain to people. On our side, HPE, which is Hewlett Packard Enterprise, so we do products and services geared toward data. So we are selling servers, cloud computing, storage, networking, software, high performance computing, things of that nature. And so at one time, we were all one company, and it made more sense to separate and have two separate companies that could focus on those two different individual items. And so we are not sister companies. We are not under the same umbrella. We have separate board of directors. We have separate CEOs and presidents. We have separate New York Stock Exchange symbols and everything. So I'm glad that Zach asked this, because it's been 5.5 years, almost 6 years, and we still do have people that come in and they haven't done their research. And so they still think that we are computers and printers and things of that nature. So I know you hear it all the time, but I will say, super important to do your research. I told Zach, I actually did an interview with someone yesterday who did not know that we were two different companies, and they were interviewing for a recruiting position. They wanted to be a recruiter with our company. So take the time to make sure you know the company. I'm not saying you have to know everything about them, but knowing the basics and what they do is really important. So so hopefully that helps, Zach, explain the difference. I think for me, someone again who's not technical, that is the simplest way I have learned to explain it and understand it.
Definitely, I think that helps. And I think it leads into a question that do you have so you talked about doing research and potentially not knowing a whole lot about the company, and that potentially could be a potential deal breaker in an interview. Is there any other kind of potential pet peeves or deal breakers with applicants that you think would be good for students to know about?
I think that's probably, I'm going to call it a pet peeve. I think that's probably one of my largest pet peeves. And having worked at other places, I think everyone gets a little frustrated when you're interviewing for a company and you don't even know anything about them. So I would definitely say that. I would also say another, I don't know that it's a deal breaker, but I think it speaks loudly, is don't be distracted when interviewing, and definitely make sure you're coming across as interested in that position. I have had people before that I've interviewed that it was obvious they probably have applied to 50 jobs and they just want a job. and so it came across as they really weren't interested in it, but maybe just needed a job for whatever reason, which I get. We all just went through a pandemic, right? And we all now know that that's important. But if you're going to interview with me, show me you're interested. Make sure I know you're interested, and don't be distracted. None of us like that. I've been on the side of being the person being interviewed, and the interviewer was distracted, and it's not fun for anyone. So I would say knowing the company, doing some research, and then make sure you're showing your interest. And if you're not interested, I hate to say this, but don't waste people's time. If you're not interested in that job, don't waste my time. This is recruiters get real. So I'm going to be real here. None of us right here today want our time wasted for anything. And so, if it's something you're not really interested in and would not take the job and don't like the company or don't care, probably not the best thing to go and interview with that company. That's going to come out first off, but secondly, that's not going to reflect well on you.
So I think I want to follow up a little bit of that. Sometimes a student will say, well, I just want to get some interviews to get some practice.
Yeah.
So I think you're potentially saying that you could look at it that way, but do it for jobs that you're going to potentially take.
Yes. And that's a great clarification, because I totally understand, especially where you are in your life right now, that you need practice. But don't use me as an employer as a way to do like a mock interview, right? I mean, go do those mock interviews. Bauer hosts mock interviews with recruiters and people from industry like me. Take advantage of those opportunities. And yes, Zach, you're right. I'm not saying don't interview to get experience, but do it for those companies you're interested in and the positions you're interested in. And you don't go do 50 of them, because after a while that reflects, you're tired. That's a lot of interviews, but certainly seek out some other ways too to get some experience. Like I said, with doing mock interviews, or even talking to people to do informational interviews before you actually interview. I mean, even that's some experience, right? So I'm definitely not saying don't do it for just the experience, but be intentional about it. I think that's the key word there is be intentional. Don't apply to 100 different companies and do 100 interviews with each, or do an interview with each of those companies. Be intentional.
Yeah, and just as a pitch, our mock interview weeks are always we have a week in November and a week in April. So and as Renee said, we have employers come in and conduct mock interviews, so that's the perfect place to practice those things.
Yeah.
So a question I wanted to ask before, since we're getting close to our end, but I thought it'd be really good for you to talk about, is tailoring your resume around an applicant tracking system. I think it's something I get asked a lot by students, of how do I make my resume something that if a recruiter has an applicant tracking system, they'll see. So do you mind talking a little bit about that for a little bit?
I don't mind talking about this because it's one of my favorite things to make sure people are educated on, because it's so important. So if we're using an applicant tracking system, which if you're not familiar with what that is, that's essentially the software, the system that we're using when you submit your resume or application online, right? And within that, it's basically, the easiest way to put it, it's basically a big database, right? And so what we're doing, as I kind of mentioned earlier, our recruiters are searching through those applicants. And especially with large companies like ours, we can have hundreds of applicants for one job, right? So it's super important that when you first off are applying for a job, you need to tailor your resume for almost every job you apply to. And we all know this is not fun and it's time consuming. But what you need to take into consideration is when we're using these applicant tracking systems, they're called ATS for short, it's electronic. And so when we're doing our searches And we're searching for words that are in our job description because that's important and that's what we're looking for. And that word is not in your resume, you're not coming up in my search. I hope that makes sense. So looking at the job description and identifying the key words, and if you have those skills and you have experience with that, you want to make sure you're using those keywords in your resume. Now, obviously, you don't want to copy things word for word, but you want to take those keywords and make sure that they're in there. So I'll give a very easy example, but I was thinking with our engineers, which I know this is a different audience, but just kind of a simple example. I mentioned coding earlier, and there's different languages. If we say in our job description, we're looking for, this certain language, and nowhere in your resume do you mention that you have experience with that language, although you do have experience with that language, you're not going to pop up most likely on my radar. Because if I'm doing a search for that language, I don't know that. So, if you're in, let's take HR, right? And let's say in our job description, it talks about recruiting or talent acquisition, some of these keywords and buzzwords, and those are things I'm looking for, then you want to make sure that, if you have that experience, again, that's reflected in your resume. So keep in mind that a lot of times these are systems reading your resume. Just like if you went into Google, if you're not typing the right words, you're not getting the right results, right? Although I feel like with Google, you always seem to get pretty good results. But that's one thing to keep in mind is with these ATSs, it's machines reading it and initially. So you have to use those keywords. And so that does sometimes mean with every job you are applying to, you may have to tweak things. Now, what I've done in the past, if I'm looking at several different kinds of jobs, especially when I was changing my career, there were a couple different interests I had. I had maybe like 3 different general resumes that spoke to those 3 areas I was interested in. And so that way, as a job came up that I was applying to, I had a basic template and I could look at that job description and see if the keywords there were matching what I already had, or if I needed to tweak it a little bit. But I do think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not picking out those keywords and tweaking your resumes for the jobs that you're applying to. Because like I said, that again is just not going to get you on our radar because it's a machine that's reading it. And even if it wasn't a machine, if it was a person initially reading that, on average, I think the estimate is, recruiters look at your resume for an average of like 8 to 10 seconds. And what we are doing is when we're physically looking at a resume, we're looking for those keywords. All right. So again, even if it was a person reading it, I need to see those keywords on there, which initially tells me, okay, I need to take a deeper look at this resume and this candidate because they've got those things we were looking for.
I think yeah, I think that's super helpful. And we're at the close of our hour, so I just wanted to ask. I've ended each of these with the same question. Can you give your one biggest piece of advice for students who are job searching right now? What's one thing that you think would be helpful for them?
I just want to give you guys motivation. I mean, I don't have words of wisdom that are going to just, make this better, but hang in there. We've all been through it. You will find a job. I will say it may not be your dream job, and that's okay. You got to start somewhere. I don't think many of us started out with our dream job. And sometimes you get into something, you realize you liked it, and you didn't even know you liked it, but hang in there, utilize your resources. Now is the time as a college student that you can use these resources and you can use this as a learning opportunity. So take advantage of that because you have people cheering you on and supporting you, and I'm one of them. So, just hang in there. It's hard and it's hard for everybody, but you'll make it, and just, be willing to be flexible and know that next job you get is getting you one step closer to that dream job. So, so hang in there and good luck with everything.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for joining us today. We, I think, had a really informative session. Renee, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.